Because we're caught up in situations that feels complicated and complex, the perspectives we have on leadership can feel equally and even more complicated and complex. I have this very, very simple, maybe even simplistic belief that leadership depends on a skill and a technology that is almost as old and as ancient as time itself. Certainly for as long as human beings have been around, this technology has been at our disposal. And depending on how we are able to use, to utilize, to deploy this technology, we are able to create amazing things. And this technology is simple communication. One of the things that I've come to realize is that the quality of our conversations pretty much determine the quality of the cultures we have in an organization. And of course, the quality of a culture in an organization determines the kinds of results that that organization, or for that matter, that team can yield. And so what I want to offer you in this particular video is a few perspectives that can help you have conversations with your team that help you to move the needle with each individual or with a collective in a way that feels meaningful relative to the results that you want to accomplish collectively, as well as meaningful individually. Now, any leader has to navigate the tension between being and doing. Being is that very human element. It's that element in which I am seen as a human being. I am not diminished to what I can perform, what I can do, and what I can do for you. I live beyond just this vessel of transaction that exists between myself and you as a leader. Being is the capacity that a leader, or observing the being, or holding sacrosanct the being, is the ability and the capacity in the leader to see the human being in a way that doesn't create shame, and in a way that permits vulnerability, and permitting vulnerability is what facilitates transformation. When we hold people in shame through criticism, through backbiting, through not giving them feedback, and even through not, honoring the promises that we make to them, what we do is we create suspicion and resistance, and when there's suspicion and resistance, change and transformation is a far, far, far way away. Then there's the doing element that every single leader must manage. So the doing, as I mentioned in the previous video, is about the tasks. It's about doing what must be done so that we can achieve what we have set out to achieve, what we've come together to achieve and to create. When a leader is able to navigate this tension effectively, what ends up happening is that there is a greater capacity that is developed within the person, the individual, and within the team. And the greater the capacity that is cultivated within each individual, the more this person can experience self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is simply this ability to do what I said I was going to do, to show up to my challenges and to meet myself in those challenges and to accomplish something. Now, that doesn't mean that I succeed necessarily. It's the showing up that makes self-efficacy a human skill worth cultivating, because so few of us, because of shame and because we fear vulnerability, we don't show up in the first place to either our challenges or to our opportunities. When the self-efficacy is cultivated, when the capacity is cultivated, each person individually and in the collective can move into a bigger version of themselves, whatever that might be. And as they become bigger versions of themselves, there's an evolutionary opportunity. And when there are enough evolutionary opportunities at the disposal of an individual or a team, over time, what we experience is transformation. So I want to share with you a few thoughts about conversational perspectives that I typically hold in the back of my mind. It is something that I hang as a framework in the back of my mind with every single conversation, so I can understand where a person is at that moment in time in that conversation relative to that context. I want to reiterate this again. This is not about putting people into boxes. This is about recognizing where people are in or at in a particular moment in time, in a particular context, with a particular issue. And it's about utilizing this within the context of that conversation. So these are conversational perspectives that you can use professionally, you can use it in any aspect, and hopefully it is going to help you to shift the needle on where your team is at. And this is not useful only to a team that is underperforming. This is exceptionally useful with a team that is performing well and has the potential to really and truly expand the impact, the influence in the results they have as a team and results of a broader organization. So before I share with you the 4 perspectives, I want to just share with you 2 aspects that must be managed or held in the back of your mind. All the 4 perspectives fit into these 2 contexts or ideas. So the first idea is the idea of performance, and the second idea is the idea of connection. Now, what is performance? Performance is the doing. It's how well I do what I'm supposed to do so that my contribution helps to create the team's success and, of course, my own success. Performance is the doing. The doing can be done well, it can be done poorly, it can be done exceptionally poorly, it can be done exceptionally well. In my experience, there are so many things about performance that is simply not communicated with people. Because we feel uncomfortable about giving people both good news and good information and feedback, and because we feel quite uncomfortable about giving people bad news and bad feedback, we tend to keep our performance feedback either very obscure, for many people it's completely absent, and then we keep it very generalized. Now, whether a person is performing competently or incompetently, everybody needs feedback. This is critical to cultivating self-efficacy. It helps people to understand where they must focus. I want to just spend a minute or 2 on how we can look at performance. You may already know this, but perhaps not, and it's useful to you to know that there are different degrees of performance. There is this idea that I am unconsciously incompetent. When someone is unconsciously incompetent, it is they're living in a place where they don't know what they're supposed to know, and they don't even know that they're supposed to know it. So often people are unconsciously competent, nobody gives them feedback, and they continue underperforming. And they lose their self-efficacy because they can see, they can feel that they're not doing as well as they're supposed to, but they have no idea what shifts are needed from them because no one is giving them the feedback. Also on performance is then the person is given the feedback, or they become aware of the unconscious incompetence, and they now become consciously incompetent. Think about what it feels like for you to be very consciously incompetent. You know you can't do something, and you meet yourself in a choice point. You either show up to learn how to do that, or you walk away from it. Now, obviously, in the work context, many people, they don't have the luxury of walking away from the thing that they are consciously incompetent about. And so they feel vulnerable. They have to ask for help, they have to ask for support. They need tools and they need resources, and they fear being ridiculed. And very often, the environment itself might or might not be ridiculing them. But please keep in mind that they have their own inner critic that is at work ridiculing them, judging them, and putting them down and shaming them. And so this person is in an incredibly vulnerable state. And we've got to know and honor this place that they're in and know how to converse with them around this particular state that they find themselves in. Then we progress towards being consciously competent. We know how to do what we're needing to do. Conscious competence is the beginning of feeling that level of self-efficacy. We may not yet be at confidence, but we're starting to feel like, we don't have to be nervous, we don't have to be anxious, and we don't have the feeling of having to watch, over our shoulder all the time for, whatever feedback we're getting that we are underperforming. The next level of performance is unconscious competence. To be unconsciously competent is a great feeling. We feel confident, we use less energy to do what we do, and we do it with a degree of elegance and ease and comfort, and we are able to execute things with a bit less, worry, concern, and anxiety about the performance itself and about the impact we're having on the bigger system. Whilst unconscious competence is beautiful, there are many risks attached to it, and I want to mention two. The first is we are now operating from autopilot. We are no longer deliberately thinking about what we're doing. And so what we're at risk of doing is we're at risk of creating mistakes, not because we don't know how to do what we're supposed to do, but because we become careless. We're not vigilant at the same level any longer. We're not curious at the same level any longer. We take things for granted. And this leads in to the second element where unconscious competence is problematic. We get to a point where we forget our own learning curve. We forget how much is involved in cultivating the skills that we have and the skill level and the awareness and the knowledge that we have. And when we're interacting with newcomers, we assume that they know what we know, and we become quite intolerant of their learning journey, and we don't honor them when they are in their unconscious or conscious incompetence. So there's an arrogance that we're at risk of when we're experiencing unconscious competence. Now, instead of experiencing unconscious competence, we also have the opportunity to experience mastery. Now, mastery is a beautiful place to be in because not only do we know things at an unconscious level, but we know why we know it. We know and we remember the journey that we embarked on and how learning took place for us to know what we know now. We know how to teach what we know to others, and we know how to improve and to innovate on what we're doing when we're, doing what we do very well. And so on the surface, unconscious competence and mastery might look very similar, but they show up in the system very, very differently. And how we respond to change is also very different. Unconscious competence loves the status quo. Mastery is curious. Mastery wants to play with change and efficacy and innovation and wants to do things differently. So I'd ask you, what is your relationship with performance? What aspects of your performance do you feel you are consciously incompetent in, competent in, consciously, unconsciously competent in? What do you feel you're masterful at? By the same token, if you were to plot your team members in terms of that spectrum, how would you plot the various members of your team? So the next element I want to share with you, or aspect of this conversational aspects I want to share with you, perspectives I want to share with you, is this element of connection. Originally, when I was taught this model around self actualization, it wasn't called connection, it was called purpose and meaning. And purpose and meaning is essential for everyone. Any leader who is having conversations with people without exploring purpose and meaning is missing out on the pure potential and um, the additional energy and the voluntary contributions that that team member can make. I extend it beyond purpose and meaning to connection because I think that it's so much more than just purpose and meaning. It's much more than, our motivation. What this is really talking to is our motivation. And our motivation is about the quality of the connections that we have with ourselves. It's the quality of the connections that we have with the people around us. It's the quality of the connections that we have with what we want to accomplish as a collective. And it's really, really important for us to harmonize all of these things when we're having conversations with people. So when we're having these conversations with our team members, it's really important to recognize that connection, purpose, meaning, when we have these conversations, we've got to bring it back to the individual themselves. If we're talking persistently or exclusively, when we do happen to talk about it, the meaning or the vision of the team and the vision of the organization and the meaning and the purpose of the team and the organization, it becomes really, really uninspiring for people. It's not personal. In your conversations with your team members, make meaning, make purpose personal. Why do they come to work every day? Why do they put up with what they put up with? Why do they sacrifice their sleep so they can deliver something? And if you know these things, it's not just that you're knowing these things. What you're helping your team member do is to remember. Because very often we come to work and we switch over into autopilot. We operate from the parts of our brain that doesn't experience growth and expansion. We operate from the parts of our brain that is on autopilot. It's the parts of our brain from which fright, freeze, and appease operates or is launched. And when we're operating from these places and spaces in our mind, we don't really have the capacity to become masterful contributors. We don't really have the ability to bring discretionary efforts. We operate from compulsion. We operate from having to, must, and should. Discretionary contributions is really from a place of desire. And when we are working because what we're doing is important to us individually, because of our children at home, because of what we want to accomplish, our own dreams, our own aspirations, our own desires, now we're starting to really, really tap into the why of work for ourselves. Connection is also, of course, about the relationships we have with people. Are we amongst people that we feel we can thrive with? Are we amongst people we feel we belong with? We feel included. We feel that we are part of the decision making in the space. Do we feel any degree of ownership? Without ownership, accountability is a very, very big leap. And so the way in which we have conversations with people allow us to extract from them, their own meanings, their own purposes, their own connections, and their own ways of thriving and flourishing. We can never assume that we know what makes people thrive and what makes people flourish. They hold the keys to unlocking that. And only through conversation can you help them to unlock that for their own benefit, and then also for the benefit of everyone around them. I want to add very quickly that we don't do the one at the expense of the other. This is really about integrating the two. Any leader who over-focuses on the one at the expense of the other is unable to, on the one hand, lift self-efficacy, and on the other, create levels of inspiration within their team members. I'm going to pause now and I'll connect with you in the next video.